Florida State has lost a prime recruit from its class of 2025. What does that mean moving forward?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. Well, the Noles didn't play this weekend. They're off, but they did lose a very important recruit to the class of 2025. The Texas Longhorns have flipped defensive tackle Myron Charles from Port Charlotte, Florida, from the Florida State Seminoles. I want to give a little backdrop to this, some of my personal opinions on it. I know Myron pretty well, been around him several times. He played with the California Power 5-on-5 team. I actually did a whole show on that. That's the new revelation. Instead of just 7-on-7, there's a way for linemen to compete now, and that's 5-on-5. But the most important thing here is when you start 0-2, if you take nothing else from this podcast, this is just the obvious, and it just needs to be stated. When you start 0-2 and people are pointing at you across the nation, the media, fans, myself included, recruits notice. Myron made his decision yesterday afternoon. It was probably just after the game between Michigan and Texas. The Longhorns went up to Ann Arbor and whipped the Wolverines. That wasn't much of a contest. And Texas is just in a better spot right now, according to what I see. And I think a lot of recruits look at it that way. There are going to be a lot of kids that look at this like, hey, I just want to go with the team that's going to give me the best chance to get to where I want to go. And of course, that is the National Football League. Florida State's defense, if you were objective, keyword, objective, would you really want to play in the unit that you have seen against Georgia Tech and Boston College? Why would you? It's kind of hard to blame anybody. Now, here's my personal perspective on this. Myron is from Port Charlotte. It's in the greater Punta Gorda area. It's just a little bit north of Fort Myers. He's a deep South Florida guy. He's a kid I was making fun of when we were in Atlanta earlier this year in the spring. It was a cold morning, and he's getting ready to go out there and compete. He does not like cold at all. And I was picking on him about it. So were some of the other guys because he just hates it. But he's still going to Austin to play for the Longhorns, and it does get cool in Austin, and they get some cold, cruddy weather there. But he's bypassing it. He's not worrying about that. At the end of the day, winning is what matters most, not only to fans, administrators, athletic directors, presidents of universities like Florida State, media, or anybody else. You must find ways to win now if you want to keep recruits. I'd mentioned this last week during a couple of the live shows. It's coming. People are going to come after recruits, and they were going after Myron anyway. Texas was one of the schools after him for those that were interested. Florida State, Miami, and Texas were his final four. Out of the four schools, Miami has had him on campus as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami continues to recruit Myron. And to be honest, all of Florida State's recruits should be looked at, just from a broad general perspective, as you never know. If they lose to Memphis, the floodgates could completely open. 0-2 is pretty bad. Losing to a G5 team on your home field in a third loss in a row to start a season, Mike Norvell and his staff could be in major trouble. I know that's not exactly a revelation either, but I'm going to state it just for the record. Don't want anybody saying anything about it later. That's why. Does Myron fit Florida State better than Texas? Probably. Is Myron a good guy? Yeah. Is Myron looking out for his own best interest? I would venture to say yes. I can't really blame him. And good for him for looking outside the box in general. But again, I don't think it's really that close as a fit. Florida State is probably the better fit just culturally for him being where he's from, etc. But this is just the microcosm of the bigger issue. You have stunk on the field. Texas is probably going to the college football playoff. Texas may or may not win the SEC, but they're probably going to make it. They've got some big games coming up still. I think they have Georgia, etc. We'll see what they do, but I mean, a collapse for them would be 9-3 this season. I highly doubt Florida State makes 9-3, to put it mildly. But then again, I thought Florida State, when I picked my preseason, I had them 11-1. I was as wrong as any person in the country. So maybe I'm not the person to ask about Florida State week to week. I don't know. It's just maddening to me how poorly they have played. But I'm not the one noticing it here that matters. It's Myron Charles and other recruits. So what do Florida State fans need to look for in recruiting moving forward? Well, there's two things. Number one, how much do they go after guys like I don't know how much they'll do with interviews and stuff. Probably not a lot, but how much will they do as it relates to getting stuff done to keep guys in the mix is one, but more important, like Myron or anybody else that might flip, how hard do they go after them? And can we see definitively the effort that they put forth? Relationships are still always the key in recruiting. That's not going to change. It's just not. For the record, I want to read off some of Myron's recruiting rankings here. These are from the 4 major services, and you can take this as you see fit. It's not a big deal to me. I might as well just share my screen, and I will show what I have here for Myron for those of you on YouTube. But it's interesting to me that Myron is at a 4-star grade for all 4 of the services on 3, 247, ESPN arrivals. And here are their rankings from national, D-line, and then the state of Florida for each. On 3, 58th player in the country, 4th best defensive lineman, 9th player in the Sunshine State, 247, 214th, 26 and 26. ESPN 167, 13 and 19, and then rivals 173, 9 and 35. So Myron is, quite honestly, a player you just couldn't really lose, for lack of a better term. And he's a player that I think it's really important to look at. And I'm going to talk about this here in a minute with the preview with Memphis. If you're going to get back to being an elite program, D-tackle is important. You need as many big-bodied athletes as you can get. I understand that you're not going to be perfect in your success, etc., but it's really important. Looking at Florida State's class is what I'm going to do next, just a little bit of an overview, Kevin Wynn, etc. But I wanted to give this baseline with big fella here, Mr. Myron Charles, because if you lose anybody else in this spot, like they can't lose Wynn, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, you're still behind. You're trying to play catch up to some of these other programs like Georgia, Ohio State, etc. Losing Myron is a major problem, not only because it's a sign of what could come, but because of the position that he plays. So with that being stated, I'm going to preview the next part here. This next segment is one I will dislike doing, but it is paramount. That is next here at Locked On Seminoles as we talk about the possibility of Florida State actually taking another step back as a program based on recruiting. Have you tried 5-Hour Energy lately? With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up to get stuff done around the house, at your job, or anywhere else. 5-Hour Energy's website has flavors that you can try out from many different styles like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. Just try whatever you want, see which one's best for you. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack, 24-pack. You could get 5 of the watermelon. You could get 6 of the tropical burst, whatever it is, mix and match, and they can get delivered right to your front door at your place. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like yourself have trusted for over 20 years. Make sure to check them out. They're going to also be at your counter, at your convenience store, at your grocery store, etc. So make sure to notice that as well. Go to 5hourenergy.com, and that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is valid only through the 30th of September on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. So Florida State is definitely in a bad spot here with recruiting because they're 0-2. Teams are going to come after them. It's right now. So the next 2 or 3 minutes I'm talking about, you need to understand point blank. It is going to be a very tumultuous time for Florida State recruiting, even if what you see and or read is not all that bad. This is how it really works behind the scenes. Right now, as I noted in the live shows last week, I guarantee you there are programs just like Texas that just flipped Myron. They're working hard because these are just a few, certainly not in totality, a few of the things that are going on. There's nothing that I'm more competitive about than recruiting, and I'm not going to hear it from anybody else. I'm pretty blunt about this. They are not in a good spot here. Teams are going to hammer them, and the evidence is on the field. There's no debating it. There is no maybe. There is no possibly we need to get a little better here or there to help her. No. They need to win now, and it needs to look aesthetically pleasing to recruits, to parents, etc. Do you really think that's going to happen in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? No, I don't either. Florida State is in a very bad spot here. They were off to a pretty darn good start in the recruiting class. Myron obviously was part of that. They have some other things to worry about because, in my opinion, and this is for each recruit to figure out, obviously, there is not a recruit when you start off a season like this that is safe. Not one. I don't care if it's a diehard Noles fan. I don't care if it's a kid that had the greatest visit. I don't care if it's a kid that has a tremendous relationship with a staff member or multiple. And to me, as I state on this show constantly, relationships, yes, they're number one on the board for why kids pick schools. But that doesn't mean it's bulletproof. Losing is not an option. No fan accepts losing. No recruit will, parents won't, etc. There has to be a reason for it. Maybe if you had a ton of injuries. Florida State is just laid an egg 2 weeks in a row. I think they're in trouble with recruiting unless they beat Memphis. If they lose to Memphis, I will do a whole show on why the sky is falling. Recruiting will be a major part of it. Guaranteed. But this is where it gets specific. As I mentioned a moment ago before the break, you're trying to catch certain schools. We know who they are. Ohio State, Texas, ironic with that one, Georgia, Alabama. Those are the programs that, generically speaking, it's every year. They get the elite defensive linemen, and they are why those schools have an easier time from year to year, even if they lose a quarterback, even if they lose their star running back or receiver. When you just bludgeon the team in front of you based on high school recruiting at the D tackle and DN positions, your job as a head coach becomes significantly easier. The idiot brigade that just thinks recruiting number in general matters, and that's the bottom line, is wrong by a mile. There are about 4 prime positions, 5 depending on how you want to label it: corner, D-line, quarterback, offensive tackle. Those are definitive, and now I kind of have a hybrid spot there. Not receiver, but elite receiver as a 5th, meaning a guy that the other team has to scheme for on every play. It helps you have a lot of speed, etc. That's great. But a dude. Florida State, obviously, is struggling with that too, but that's for another podcast. So I want to bring up the key recruit left on the board, even though he's committed. Florida State has a commitment from a young man named Kevin Wynn, tremendous football player in the state of Georgia from a very small school, but he is dominant. He was recruited by Georgia. He was recruited by Texas. He was recruited by Florida State, et cetera, et cetera. The Noles have won his commitment. One cannot teach. 6'2", 300+ pounds, agile, mobile, and motivated. I had the opportunity to go to Bowdoin High School in Georgia a few weeks back. Check out a practice. There's a recruit there. I'll probably talk about him and some other kids pretty soon in the 26 class that Florida State is after. He actually had Florida State gloves on. I got a pretty cool photo of him. When I was talking to him, and then afterwards the coaches, we started getting into discussion about their schedule and teams they'd played and all that. This is a team that's won back-to-back state titles. Both 1A programs, one of the best programs, smaller programs in the United States. And he told me flat out, unsolicited, I didn't even know they played him, that they'd win against Wynn. And he was undoubtedly the best defensive lineman they'd gone against the past couple of years. And he said the best D lineman he's had to play or coach against in his tenure as a head coach. I thought that was interesting because then he also mentioned they had played Manchester, who has Justice Terry. Every school in the country has offered him. He's a kid I know well. He's probably going to end up at Georgia, but Florida State and everybody's recruited him hard. That's another kid that is elite. And he said, it's definitely a win. I said, why? And he said, Wynn plays with an effort level that is just different. And the way he went on to define him basically was pretty simple here. He's talking about the ability to not just make the tackle, the ability not to just overwhelm somebody because he's bigger, faster, stronger. Plays that were outside his area, he runs to the ball. He does all the things that you want players to do that coaches harp on and you see in every video on ESPN, etc. Naturally motivated. At 6'2", 320, with his athleticism, that's important. Under Bowden, Florida State always had guys in that realm. Maybe not quite that big. They didn't usually have 320 guys. But Kevin Wynn has a chance to be a special player. Before I go further, I have no idea if he's completely solid. I have never spoken to him. I don't know. He's from a very small town in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. Just random that he's there, but he is. You cannot lose kids like that, or anybody else, honestly, if you want to build this program back up. It's fallen flat on its face in the first two games. Who knows what's going to happen from here? But that's the kind of guy you have to get. You have to keep. And I'm guaranteeing you, Georgia, Texas, all these other schools, they're piling on right now with negative recruiting. Kevin Wynn is just an example. But you already lost Myron. That's what Keith's, he's a 300-pounder, a defensive tackle that you really needed. If you were to lose Wynn, it would be catastrophic. If you want to get back to being a dominant program, it always starts with recruiting. That's first and foremost. You ain't got players, you need coaching, but the players make tackles. The players sack the quarterback. The players catch passes. Kevin Wynn and the rest of the guys that are in the class, and again, it's a good class. It just right now is at a little bit of a halt because they're 0-2, need to figure it out. So before I move into the overall viewpoint of what's going on with the Memphis game, I want to do a brief preview with that. Just note that Florida State behind the scenes here is in a little bit of a difficult spot. I think that there could be some other bad recruiting news. I don't know who it'll be, but teams are going to come after them. It is paramount that they beat Memphis and look good doing it. Winning 16-13 or something ain't going to cut it. They need to look dominant. It needs to be aesthetically pleasing. Just wanted to state that. Coming up next, we're going to give a little bit of a preview on what has to happen in regards to Florida State being ready for a unique Memphis offense. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Have you downloaded the Ibotta app yet? It's a free app. It lets you earn cash back each and every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries, beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're trying to purchase. The average Ibotta user earns $256 back per year. That could cover the cost of a shopping trip, getting your car fixed, taking somebody out to a fancy dinner, or whatever else you want. It's money in your pocket. Other apps give you points, but don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back on what you withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, a Macy's, a Sephora, Best Buy, or anything else. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 off just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All right. A little bit about Memphis before we really dive in on Monday. Wanted to just kind of reiterate a few of the things that I've said about Seth Henigan. Wanted to talk a little bit about the pass catchers and an interesting offensive line. This is a unit that has lost some guys from last year, but through 2 games, they played Northern Alabama and Troy, 2 teams obviously in the state of Alabama, and they've done pretty well. So for those of you unfamiliar with Henigan, here's the baseline. As a 4th-year player, he's been a starter since his freshman year. This is a guy that's very valuable to them, not only for throwing the football, setting protections, making the right checks, getting them into the run play that they need, not the one that's called. You're not going to just fool him with a bunch of fronts and different looks pre-snap. Those days are over. He has a very different mindset than most guys. He's a Dallas area quarterback, grew up throwing the football. This is what he loves. He fits the mentality of today's game very, very well. So without further ado, here are a few of his stats, and then we'll look at some of the finer points via Pro Football Focus. But I took the following off CFB Stats, by the way. Great site for information, CFB Stats. So 42 of 62 through 2 games. Memphis, the Tigers are 2-0. 67.7% for Seth Henigan. 469 yards for Henigan, 7.6 yards per pass completion or pass attempt. That's actually not great. 3 touchdowns, no picks. Before I go further, here are a couple of things. If you give him easy access throws, the 4 and 5 yarders, the quick slant, this little slide or out to the flat to the running back, he'll put his athletes in position to just make plays. He's a little bit of a boring guy sometimes. But sometimes teams do that because they don't have the playmakers in their secondary to match up. Playing Northern Alabama and Troy, they probably each have a guy that might end up at the NFL Combine in their secondary. But as a unit, I doubt they have the kind of players that Florida State does. So it's not necessarily a great barometer just looking at his statistics overall. That's why we need to talk about a couple of things. If you play off of him, and most teams probably will with how they do coverage, they want to wait for a mistake like a false start, a holding penalty, a missed block, get a sack. They just don't want to give up touchdowns. It's different for Florida State. You've got a secondary that, at least theoretically, has a bunch of talent. A couple of guys that got a chance to go to the NFL draft, combine, and all this kind of stuff after this season. Thomas, Ventrell Cypress, etc. They've got players. But they haven't been challenged yet this year, really, not consistently. Each of Georgia Tech and Boston College attempted a mere 16 passes against the Noles. Teams that wanted to run the ball and both had very mobile quarterbacks. Henigan is not. He can run a little bit. Don't get me wrong. He'll take off if you give a wide open gap. He'll go get a first down. Again, he's smart. He's not going to just give away yards. He's going to take them. But he wants to stay in the pocket or just move a little bit, distribute the football, and let his players make plays. But this is where it gets interesting and becomes the chess match. The ability to go against a team that has a really good quarterback will let some light shine in one way or the other on whether Florida State's defense is A, adjusting, and B, the coaches know what to do, because the following stats are just blatant. And that's why Pro Football Focus can be a really interesting situation. 2 key areas, just going to read them across. Number 1 is under pressure. Number 2 is not blitzed. So when he has duress, and any quarterback's going to go down in stats, but listen to Henigan's statistics when he's under pressure. 9 out of 18, 80 yards, just 80 yards, 4.4 yards per attempt, which is terrible, and 1 touchdown. Still doesn't have a pick this year. So, I mean, he will not just throw it away into the hands of 2 or 3 guys, whatever, like throw it up for grabs, I guess it's better. He will throw it into the dirt, whatever. He'll take whatever penalty. He's just a very savvy guy. But under duress, he's pretty mediocre, just like anybody else. However, more specific, if you get a 4-man rush on him like anybody, you're in business. When he is not blitzed, listen to the following statistics for Seth Henigan. 26 of 34, 76.5%, 308 yards, 9.1 yards per attempt, and 2 scores. 2 points from that. The 9.1 really concerns me. As I mentioned before, Henigan is a guy with a lot of talent, very savvy, very experienced. But when you're getting easy access throws, a lot of them end up being 3 to 5 yard gains. So that means 2 things. That means 1, he's making accurate throws where his guys can truly make a move. They're catching the ball in stride. He's accurate, very, very accurate. And then 2, if you give easy access throws, that's one thing. But he's also finding some holes in the second level of the defense. He might have taken another step up because these aren't just basic hook routes. These aren't just basic curls. He's got to be hitting stuff with guys moving and guys also making plays after the catch. And that's where this comes in. The 2 receivers to know are Rock Taylor and Demir Blankenship. Taylor is 6'3", 215. He's a senior. He's the guy. Big body dude, fits the NFL profile of what they want. He is priority number 1 for Florida State to figure out, but you can't do anything completely just to stop him because Demir and other guys will also cause you havoc. So 9 catches, 114 yards, 12.7 yards per catch. Hasn't scored yet, which is a little surprising, but 6'3", 215 and a senior. Let's be honest. That's a guy that you have to slow down, and that's probably priority number 1. More than likely going to play some boundary, move him around. They're going to do different things. Rock Taylor is a very big key for next weekend's game. The other guy, Demir Blankenship, is 5'10", 185. He's also a senior, smaller, shiftier. 7 catches, 96 yards, 13.7, no scores. Neither one of them has a touchdown. It's a little surprising. But they spread the ball around a lot. Again, you're not going to just focus on one thing and slow down the Memphis offense. You're just not. When they get in the red zone, and I'll talk about the O-line momentarily, but when they get in the red zone, they can pass or throw and score. This is where they become a pain for Florida State staff. Senior quarterback, 4-year player, that's not fun. And then they got a running back that's also not fun either. Mario Anderson's 5'9", 210. He's only a sophomore out of state, South Carolina. 27 rushes, 171 yards, 6.3 per tote. He scored touchdowns, 2 touchdowns in each of the first 2 games for the Tigers. He's at 4 for the season. That could be a huge problem. You can't just allow him to get a draw and bust one for 30 yards. You know what I mean? You got to get after Henigan, but this is a balanced offense, and it will be a challenge to mix and match coverages. Play call, I hate doing this because I don't want to put it on coaches more. This is a play call game. They got to guess right on the blitzes and the time. Like it's unfortunate, but especially as poorly as Florida State's tackled, etc., the play calling this week defensively will be of utmost importance. You make one mistake, it'll cost you the game. I mean, there's no more thin line than that. Here's where it gets a little interesting. I was going through their offensive line. Do they pass block better, run block better? And PFF has grades. I don't know if Pro Football Focus is the greatest with grading, but let's just look at it here. I'd imagine, based on what I know about them, it's at least a decent grade. So here we go. Looking at the numbers in general, PFF, it gives you at least an idea. So run blocking, they got their number 1 guys in receive. Doesn't matter by position. But if you look at the tackles, they're both over 75%, Adams and Lewis. Adams is a smaller guy. He's one of the smallest tackles based on what he's listed at least, in the major division of football, being Division I, FBS. He's 277 is listed. That's small. Lewis is not. He's massive. He's over 300 pounds. He's like the 6'5", 320 guy. Holler and Hill, they're both over 300 pounds as well. And then down there, McKenzie's another guy over 300 pounds. So they're big. McKenzie's the weakest blocker in the run game. And I brought up the run blocking first because, quite honestly, I think that's the key. If you give Henigan first downs where he can run or pass, like they're running the ball pretty good and they get to midfield, they got in a couple of first downs, and they can start going whatever they want. Maybe they do tempo, maybe they don't. Hard to say. But they could throttle Florida State. If you do not slow down the running game, and again, the young man in question here is Mario Anderson. If you do not slow down Anderson in the run game, Henigan will just shred you with just needle point precision passing. So Florida State has to be ready for that. I'm curious, though, if they can take advantage of Adams. Not the biggest guy, but he graded out at 81.1, the highest grade. So Florida State has a challenge on their hands. I don't know if that is going to, quote unquote, be the biggest issue, but I really think if I had to guess that Florida State, they would probably be in that situation. Pass protection, this isn't a whole lot different, to be honest with you. Xavier Hill, a guard, is actually the highest, but Adams, again, pretty darn high, 77.9. Trent Holler, center, over 70%. Their front line must play pretty well together. And it's interesting because I thought that was going to be a weakness this year. I did. I thought that was going to be a weakness. I was wrong. So we'll see if that changes or not. But Florida State has a major challenge coming up for them. So, again, this is a paramount week for Florida State on the recruiting front. No doubt losing Myron Charles sucks. And no doubt that Florida State better beat Memphis, even though the challenge is going to be great because you cannot go 0-3. From a perception standpoint for recruiting, from a perception standpoint of where you're going as a program with your own guys, this is a huge week, and I wanted to give an overview. Tomorrow on Locked On Seminoles, I'll start breaking down some of their defense. I haven't even honestly looked at it. I'm going to do a little film research on them, go back, look at some of their highlights. What do they do? Do they have a special player? So that's coming up next on the Monday edition of Locked On Seminoles. Probably going to do a live show, either Monday or Tuesday. Look forward to that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do one Monday. I want to get a reaction from fans, what they've seen, not just about the Noles, but there's been all kinds of wild stuff going on. Like the shift in football right now, it's like there's no middle class. Florida State's down. Notre Dame just got beat by Northern Illinois. Tennessee annihilated NC State. They didn't beat them. They annihilated them. There's just a wild trend. I want to talk a little bit about that. So this week is going to be a very important one here at Locked On Seminoles because the landscape of college football, the Noles included, is changing a lot. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. It's been a lot of fun, and even though the trials and tribulations here lately make it a challenge, I do enjoy coming in here, so please come back and see us. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts, like Spotify, on Apple, CastBox, Amazon, wherever it may be, and of course on YouTube as well. And after this, go check out Locked On College Football with my guy Spencer McLaughlin, talking about the grant of rights, talking about conference realignment, NIL, and all the crazy upsets going on in college football. Check out Locked On College Football. Everybody have a good one. I will see you on Monday.